Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Hello, and welcome back to Must Love Books podcast. Today, I am here with Lana Harper, the New York Times bestselling author of the Witches of Thistle Grove series. Writing as Lana Popovich, she also has written 4 YA novels about modern-day witches and historical murderesses. Born in Serbia, Lana grew up in Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria before moving to the U.S., where she studied psychology and literature at Yale University, law at Boston University, and publishing at Emerson College. She lives in Chicago, where she spends most of her time plotting witchy stories and equally witchy tattoos. You can learn more at lanapopovichbooks.com. And hello and welcome, Lana. Happy release day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so happy to have you on as we are celebrating the release of the 5th Witches of Thistle Grove book.
Yeah, the 5th and final. So it's very bittersweet.
Oh,
Happy day, but also, yeah, like the end of an era for me.
so why don't you tell us a little bit about the series for those who are new to your work and maybe a little bit about what we can expect from the final story without giving, major spoilers.
No spoilers. So the Witches of Thistle Grove are their romantic fantasies set in the magical town of Thistle Grove in Illinois. There are 4 witchy families: the Harlows, the Abramoves, the Thorns, and the Blackmores, and each book centers around a couple that is either one of the witches and another family, or a witch and a normie, whichever combination, but it's always someone from one of the 4 families is always featured. I like to think of the town as one of the characters, since all of the sort of the visuals and the ambiance were what really drew me to writing something that was small town based, but also magical and fantastical and kind of escapist. So there's like romance, mystery, plenty of spice depending on the books. And usually there's either the LGBTQ element is strong in almost all of them. So a lot of the pairings are sapphic, or in any case, not straight. So the most recent book and the final one, we meet Dasha, who is a necromancer from the Abramov family. She is thrown together with her ex-girlfriend, Ivy Thorne, who is a green witch from the Thorne family. They have to plan a festival together, figure out how to defend a town from a very unexpected evil, and also kind of how to work together and maybe find their way back to each other.
I am so excited for this final one. I have been listening. I've been doing the audiobooks for the series over this last week, and I love them all so much. So I'm
That's
super
awesome.
excited for Rise and Divine.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited, especially about the audiobooks. I think I've been very lucky with the narrators so far. And the fact that
Yes.
the fact that each one gets its own narrator, that really, I think, has brought each book to life in a completely different way that I even envisioned. Very, very excited to hear this one and see it out in the world.
Yeah, and with having the different, narrators and each story, focusing on different characters, it really makes each one personal in its own way, and I really love that.
When I'm writing these and plotting them out, I'm not just thinking about what character this is going to be about. I'm also thinking about the larger sort of emotional arc that I want each book to have. So all of them have kind of their code names for me. So I have the Book of Rage, the Book of Return, the Book of Trauma, those kinds of things. I find that it's easier for me to sort of tackle each issue from a completely different perspective. And then the lenses of the families, because their magics are so different and their sort of positions in the town kind of magical hierarchy are also so different, makes it easier, just gives you a completely different perspective and lens to sort of work through all of the romance and the emotional issues and the entire journey that the characters go through.
I love that. And do you have, out of your novels in this series, do you have a character that is your favorite?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I think I have to pick Talia Avramov just because she was my first love interest in the Thistle Grove series. I'm weak for the Avramovs. She was always my secret wife. I mean, probably not so secret. Like my love for her is notorious, and I'm the biggest wannabe Avramov. I obviously would not be one. I would be a Harlow almost for sure if I were living in the world. But if I were to date one of them, even though they're kind of chaotic and they're a little unpredictable, a little morally gray sometimes, but I find them so appealing. And Talia, especially with the kind of she's from Payback's the Witch, so she and Emmy Harlow were the couple in the first book. I found the fact that she was a total marshmallow underneath that extremely sort of jaded, cool girl, bad girl facade so appealing in the way that, I've always found appealing, sometimes to my detriment, but I can't lie about it. Team Talia forever.
I mean, Talia is kind of everyone's secret witchy wife.
I know.
I
Yeah,
love her.
it's just true. We all have to accept it.
I mean, and Emmy and Talia really, they launched the whole thing, so they're also my favorite couple.
Oh, that's nice. So it's interesting to me that I always assume or I expect to hear that more often just because that's it's the first book, it's the best known one. But I don't actually, I often hear, surprisingly, the one that I hear the most is Nina and Morty, which is
Oh
not the
yeah?
one yeah, and I'm like, oh, the Blackmore, really? Like that's such a wonderful surprise for me because humanizing the Blackmores, I thought was going to be a challenge for me, and I didn't expect readers to connect with her the way that they did. So that's always really fun to hear. But I'm with you, yeah. I've never stopped missing Demi and Talia.
I love that. And you just never know which couple everyone's gonna root for.
Exactly. I mean, that's part of who you connect to, I think also has to do with where you are in terms of your own emotional journey and who kind of speaks to you. Are you looking for the book of trauma? Are you looking for the book of rage? Which one is your book? I should probably have put that somewhere on my website. Like, if you're looking, where are you in your emotional traumatic life? And which are the
Yes.
books of the crib? There should be a quiz for this.
Yes, that's what we need to do is we need to
Yep.
create a quiz. Absolutely.
Maybe that's the next move. There was a quiz at some point about which of the houses you belong to. I know that one's on my Instagram, so I feel like this is just like a half step away from that. I should get off that.
Yeah, like a BuzzFeed style quiz.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, I would definitely immediately take that quiz because now I have to know.
I mean, I'm like, I'm not even sure because they were all relevant to me at one point in time, but which one is the right one for me now? We'll see, especially now that Rise and Divine is out and I'm sort of soft saying goodbye, not forever, hopefully. I can't, I'm thinking whether or not that's going to be something that's in the future, and I don't want to say never. But having it out in the world now and thinking about future projects, I'm going to have to let go of this space as my personal projection canvas of emotions. So maybe it's time for me to revisit like which book is appropriate for me now. Who's to say?
Yeah, definitely. When you do that, you have to let me know.
I will. So for sure. And should this quiz exist, I will let you know. You will be the first call. So we can both take it.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about your inspirations for Thistle Grove and these characters and these stories.
No, I'd love to.
So let's start with your characters and their specific relationships and how they kind of interweave and entangle with each other. What inspired you to put these relationships together?
So before I even started thinking about the relationships and the stories, I had to have the backdrop of Thistle Grove very clear in my mind because once I had that, I felt like I would understand the families and the very complex sort of background and history that they brought to the table too. So I started with what would a perfect witchy town look like for me? And then I kind of built it with the components that are my favorites, from I used to live close to Salem, so a lot of the visuals and the smells and the sense impressions come from Salem around Halloween. And then other things are just, apple orchards from Massachusetts. The immersive haunted house idea comes from Sleep No More in New York, other immersive theater experiences like that. obviously there's also kind of a Ren Fair influence, a very large occult superstore. So there's all these settings where I could see these characters playing out these very personal dramas. And I wanted to create this blend of escapism and realism, where a lot of us have either visited or lived in small towns. So it's not that far out of personal experience. And a lot of us have had these very painful entanglements in different, different levels. But I always wanted there to be a clear notion that this was something that was going to have a happy ending, especially for the queer couples. Something where, ultimately you were going to end up feeling cozy and protected. And even though the emotions were very turbulent, I wanted it to be clear that the trajectory was always going to be a positive one. So that was always important to me when it came to each couple. And then the inspirations, come from, just like with everything else, experiences I've had, experiences my friends have had, real world things that I wanted to play out in a very sort of friendly, safe, magical space where you could both really enjoy kind of the sparkliness and this easy, accessible magic, and also vicariously live through what these characters are living through, and hopefully see something of yourself or something that really appeals to you and that you would want in one of them.
I love that. And one of my favorite things, truthfully, about your series is the magic system and how each of the houses, align with their own styles of magic, their own personal practices, as well as, their position within the community. How was it like creating this magic system? And, what steps did you have to take to kind of line this all up?
It was interesting for these books, unlike previous books that I've written. I didn't want the magical system to feel like a very heavy, hard TED Talk magical system, if that makes sense. I
Yes.
didn't want there to be so many rules that it was overwhelming and that it was alienating in a way. I personally, not to be clear, I love very complex magical books. And in the past, I've definitely been drawn to writing books where you really had to sit there and comprehend what was happening. But I didn't want the feeling to be anything like that. So in the very beginning, especially for Payback was helpful. That's the first book in the series, Payback's a Witch. It was helpful because it gave me the competition. And so I had to know exactly what the families were capable of magically and how that distinguished them from each other. And then once I knew that, I sort of could delve a little deep into each family's history. And with each book, I gave myself the option of and the possibility of diving a little bit deeper and digging a little bit more. So it was more of a gradual fleshing out of the town and of the families that hopefully didn't feel overwhelming, even for someone who jumped in on book 2 or 3. You don't necessarily have to read them in order. I do think it's a little bit easier. But I did find that for me, many of the revelations that came down the line, and I'm frequently asked this question, like, did you plan this all along? And the answer is I did not know. Many surprises happened, and I think a lot of this was on the back burner because I even named things like Ladies Lake would eventually become very relevant. There would, in fact, be a lady that we would get to meet in a way. And so a lot of these things were clues that I was leaving, I suppose, for my future self as well as for readers. And it was a very slow, kind of archaeological process almost, which sounds a little bit cheesy. And I've never said this about any of my other books, but it felt like, in some ways, like discovering something that existed outside of me and not just something that I was piecing together piece by piece, which was wonderful. It was really kind of a fulfilling experience for me to write something that in some ways felt so easy for me to do. It didn't feel like heavy lifting or like a burden at any time. It just felt like this wonderful place that I got to discover more of every time I wrote another of the books.
So you mentioned how you were kind of leaving some clues unbeknownst to
Mhm.
yourself for your future self. So I take it to mean that you're not quite so much of a plotter and maybe more of a pantser when it comes to your writing.
I'm like a hybrid. I used to be an entire pantser and it was terrifying. It was just the scariest thing and I just didn't know how to be better at it. And so for probably my first 2 books, my young adult books, I just kind of fumbled through them. I injected plot when I felt perhaps some plot should happen. The revisions were extremely extensive because you do in fact need things to be happening. It can't just be vibes, which is a lot of what I had happening for those. They were very vibe heavy books. And then what I did in between was I freelance screen wrote for Pixelberry Studios, who produce choose your own adventure games for mobile apps. And while I was doing that, I was forced to follow a plot. And I wrote a lot of dialogue because they're mostly dialogue-based games. And I also did some intellectual property work, so work for hire for Abrams. So two of my young adult books are work for hire books where a lot of the plot was pre-plotted by somebody else to some degree. And so looking at things from that perspective, I think really opened a door for me and kind of shook me a little bit. Like, you do need to know where you're going. You have to have some idea what's around the corner. You have to, at the very least, have to have what I call like the signal flares. Like, here's like a light in the darkness here, and these are the scenes that you have to follow through this path. And there's a lot of discovery along the way. But now, before I start writing at all, I'll usually take the time to create some character sheets. I'll have a very loose, maybe one-page outline, unless I'm writing a synopsis and trying to sell a project in a partial. So then I have a much fuller, longer synopsis to follow. And sometimes I throw that out completely when I'm actually writing. A lot of it just, I'm like, no, that was for sales purposes. Now we're on to actually writing this thing. But I found that since I've become a partial plotter, things have become much clearer and easier for me in terms of creating a more satisfying and fulfilling first draft that doesn't need as much heavy lifting to get into shape as it used to be.
And I agree. I do a little bit of writing of my own, and I'd say doing it in between, as a hybrid is, in my opinion, like that's the way to do it. Because you don't limit yourself by sticking too
Mm-hmm.
heavy to an outline that you might not jive with later on. But you do have, an overarching plot and synopsis or series of events to kind of follow and help you stay on track. So I think it allows you some flexibility that I feel is very important to allow yourself to be creative, but kind of stay on task with things.
That's exactly how I feel about it. And I also find it very reassuring because it removes a little bit, at least for me, that kind of blank page shock that happens sometimes, where you're starting a new chapter and it just feels, or it can feel so daunting even after many books written. So I like the idea of having something where I can at least kind of like the suggestion of a trail to follow. But I don't think I could ever do such a strict plot where I have plot beats like A, B, C, D needs to happen. It is 10 pages long as an outline. That's not the way my brain works. I don't even think I could do it. Like, sometimes I just don't know what's going to happen until I get there, and trying to force my brain to come to that juncture without all of the buildup that happens to it and all of the character building, and the additional sort of all of the things that you do while the process is happening. I don't think that I could arrive to scenes that are as satisfying as the ones that happen that I don't necessarily plan, to the death.
So I'm going to have us shift gears a little bit. And I want to, we're celebrating your release, but I would kind of like to step back a little bit and talk about some of your earlier works under your additional name that some readers might not connect with you, Lana Popovich.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much. Those books make me really happy. And I think actually today is a great day to think about them, just because the end of 5 books does feel like a very appropriate time to reflect on all of the books that came before and all the steps that sort of led me here. So I would love to talk about any of them. Yeah, my first 2 books were the Hibiscus Daughter duology. I don't think anyone actually calls them that except for Goodreads, but that's how they're listed on there. So it's Wicked Like a Wildfire and Fierce Like a Firestorm. They're contemporary fantasies, and they're set in Montenegro, which is where my father is from and where I spent a lot of my childhood summers. And they're about a pair of witchy twins with this kind of scary mom living in Cattaro, which is a very small Bayside town. It's a beautiful tourist area now, and it's a place that people, I think, visit more now that Dubrovnik and Croatia have become a little bit more known as destinations. So the two of them are beauty witches, essentially. Their magic is defined by and also depends on the manipulation of beauty. And it turns out that there's a very sort of a centuries long bargain that I can't say too much about without creating huge spoilers, but they're part of a much larger witchy family that has this responsibility that relies as well on channeling beauty in different ways. So it's kind of, for me, it was an examination of all of the ways that women are forced to present themselves to the world in a specific way, and how difficult it is to toe the line between too much and enough, and when are you supposed to learn all of the demands of womanhood, especially for 17-year-old girls who are kind of on that precipice. So even though it's a very magical and a very magic heavy book, I think the magic system is much more demanding than the ones in my adult books. But I enjoyed sort of that exploration into those parts of a developing woman's psychology and all of the ways in which the world has expectations of you. And do you want to meet them on your own terms? Do you want to meet them at all? How do you even go about kind of discovering who you are within those constraints? So I think they're kind of a different flavor and maybe a little bit more contemplative, but they still count, I think, fantasy adventure. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of world building. There's plenty of magic. So I think for anyone who enjoyed Payback but wish there was more magic and that the stakes were maybe higher in that sense, and that it was a little bit darker and creepier, would enjoy Wicked Like a Wildfire in the sequel.
That sounds amazing. Honestly, I have not read these ones yet. They are on my list. And I really love how you took this, magical fantasy adventure and really intertwined this extremely important message. And, since it's a YA, I think that is a great way to teach, young girls and, teen
Mhm.
girls how to, view these kind of issues, regarding womanhood and beauty and societal expectations regarding, our looks and how we present ourselves. I think that's amazing.
I hope you like them. Thank you. That's what I hope I did. Whether or not I achieved it is probably a different question, but I really, really enjoyed writing those books in a very different way that I enjoyed writing the Thistle Grove stories. So I think they fulfilled for me certain different needs as a writer, and I would love to revisit them now. I'm a little bit scared. It's a little scary, I think, to go back to earlier works. Are you going to feel the same about them? Is there going to be a sort of cringe element? So I've been putting off kind of dabbling back in that part of my creative life, but maybe now's the time. Like, see, since I'm on the kind of the next step on the horizon anyway, this might be a fun time to revisit those, which are a totally different speed also than my other two young adult books. Those are Blood Countess and Poison Priestess. So those are historical thrillers and historical horrors. Technically, they're pretty bloody. The first one is loosely based on Elizabeth Bathory, who is one of history's most notorious female serial killers. Yeah, so I can see you nodding since we're
Oh,
looking at
yes.
each other. Yeah, a fellow Elizabeth
I
Bathory stan.
have consumed so much Elizabeth Bathory content. I mean, I find her fascinating in, like obviously she's not like someone to look up to, but I find her fascinating and stories about her fascinating, especially when turn it into like a horror story, which is basically what her story is a horror. So that is awesome.
I feel the same way about her. She's just the most bewildering and intriguing historical character because she's so full of contradictions. It is so difficult to try to understand her. And because I grew up in Eastern Europe, and she's really kind of claimed by Transylvania. I'm sorry, I will rephrase that. She's claimed by Transylvania. She's claimed by Romania. She's claimed by Hungary, even sometimes, because all of those royal bloodlines commingled as much as they did. So I kept hearing about her. I kept having these culture classes at all of my American international schools, and they would talk about her. And she was just fascinating. She had this weird, dark glamour because she was very educated. And in some ways, she was a huge patron of other women. She tried to educate other women, protected them from a lot of, it was very difficult, obviously, to be female at that time. Not that it's a lot easier now, but there were specific dangers and difficulties in having any kind of successful and fulfilled life, I think, was almost an impossibility for most women at the time. So to have someone like that who was really in some ways uplifting other women, also just brutally murdering them at the same time, and so many of them without getting caught for years and years, it really defies reason. It makes you want to understand what was driving her and what was pushing her to it. And I think a lot of I had a lot of leeway there in terms of her psychology and an attempt to explain what's kind of behind all of that creepiness and the charm. So it's the book is viewed through Anna Darvulia, who was generally recognized as her kind of her familiar, her confidant, and she was accused of being a witch herself. In the book, she's younger and is more of an herbalist, and I tried to keep her generally a positive influence and not, a malevolent presence. But because she becomes so entangled with Elizabeth, it gives us a chance to at least attempt to understand how someone could have been appealing and attractive despite being an absolutely horrible, irredeemable person, which is always interesting to me. I don't know what that says about me, but a lot of people seem to share that fascination. So at least I'm not alone in my search for dark, twisted figures to be very compelled by.
Well, it always makes a compelling story. And, something doesn't necessarily need to be positive to be attractive to readers.
That's true for sure. And there's so many more. I mean, what are you going to say about someone who's uniformly good? Like, hooray, did your
Exactly.
job. At that point, you're just talking about a superhero. And if you don't have a tortured superhero, even that's flat. So I think there's the aspect of the villain is always a little sexier sometimes, I think, too, which is terrible, but it's true.
Well, and villains often make more dimensional characters. They have more layers to them.
Definitely. So those are the young adult books. Poison Priestess is also, that one's about a fortune teller and poisoner at the court of the Sun King. And this woman ran an entire circle of basically black magic practitioners and created this poisoning scandal that I had never even heard of before. I don't know why there haven't been a bunch of shows made about her, because it's Catherine Lavoisin, who I had never heard her name previously. And she seems like the sort of person that HBO would have made a limited series about her already. But I've never even seen her in a book or on film. I found her accidentally, and I don't think that I found even a single novel about her. All of the sources that I found about her were nonfiction. So that was even more interesting, and I had a lot more freedom there since I picked that murderess. For Elizabeth Bathory, I auditioned. That was their selection. And then I got to pick Catherine. And so I had even more room there to sort of pry into what an interesting person she was, because she killed a lot of people, but then she also provided safe abortions, kept lots of women working. I think was generally regarded as the lady that you went to if your husband was a terrible man and you were looking for kind of an underhanded way to get rid of him. Again, not the best, but sometimes the only option, especially back then. So she was just fascinating. She was dabbling in a lot of criminal activity. And I loved finding out about her. So that was the most historical I've ever gotten in terms of, I didn't know very much about that period. So I had to do a lot of reading to try to understand it and make it feel immersive while I was writing about it.
I think one of the best ways to figure out if a historical figure is interesting is ask yourself, would HBO make a series off of them?
That's exactly it. That's the litmus test. That's it right there. Yep.
That is the test. Like, can I see this on HBO? If not, maybe it's not very interesting, but if yes, dive right in. Here we go.
These days it's HBO and maybe even Apple TV. I think they've been doing some really
Yeah, I've been
interesting stuff.
watching
So
a
it's not
lot of stuff on there.
same. Yeah. They've I just did a rewatch of Severance. Just because I felt like it. No, really, I don't know what the next season is coming up or anything, but I really wanted to, and it was just as compelling the second time around. So they've really got a lot of good stuff going there too.
That is excellent. So I'm going to have us play a little game.
Okay.
This game, and unfortunately, it's going to require you to do a lot of answering and thinking of your own. So when I
That's
ask you about books,
acceptable to me.
yes, prepare yourself because I
Okay.
know, just like as you mentioned earlier before we were recording that, if someone asked you about a book, all of a sudden you've never read a book in your life. I am
My
right
whole
there
life.
with you. I'm right there with you. So of course I'm going to torture you a little bit with that. So we're gonna
I
play
think
a
that
game.
it was inevitable as soon as I admitted it.
Yep, exactly. That the moment you said that, I'm like, okay, well, now I know which game we're playing. So this game is called Five Things, and we will do five books you've read and liked, not just random five books, but five books you've read and liked, four genres or tropes that you love, three authors you always read, two places you love to read, and one book that you promise you're going to read soon.
Okay, all right.
So
I
let's
think
dive in. We have five books that you've read and liked.
five books that I've read and liked. Okay, so I just read Listen for the Lie by Amy Tantera. That's a thriller. Super, super fun. I did not expect to like this as much as I did. Love You Mean It by Jilly Ganyu. That's a rom-com, very tropey, really clever, super fun. Um, This is kind of a twofer. Is that allowed? Heather
Yeah,
Fawcett's two books. Okay, great, because I love them. It's Heather Fawcett's Emily Wilde books. So Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies and Emily Wilde's Map to the Other Lands. Both fantastic. And okay, but now there's can I do a series for the fifth book, even though it was
yeah,
three
why
books?
not?
Okay, cool, great. So it's Robert Jackson Bennett, or possibly Robert Bennett Jackson. I always mix up the two names. If there's three names involved, inevitably I'm not going to get it right. But it's the Divine Cities trilogy. And I just finished it. And the reason I read them at all was here we go. This is a forfer, in fact. I read The Tainted Cup by the same author, and I liked it so much that I went and read all of the previous books of his that I could find. So I think I actually hit you with like eight books for that one. I'm sorry. Am I winning or losing?
You're winning. I think you're winning.
Okay.
So what
All
are
right, I'll take it.
four genres or tropes that you love?
I really like contemporary fantasy. That's probably my favorite genre. I love soft sci-fi, if that makes sense. I think maybe it might even be called hope punk at this point. It's like the Becky Chambers books, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that has its own subgenre name, but it's the gentler sci-fi where it's more emotional and there's a lot of relationships going on. So it's like a sweeter version. It's not like hard sci-fi and there's not as much science to grapple with. And then for tropes, I love enemies to lovers. I've always loved enemies to lovers. And I really enjoy reluctant partners as well.
Ooh,
So
I like that one.
yeah, and if you combine them, that's even better. So I
Yes.
did agree that yes, From Bad to Cursed has both of those tropes because they're two of my favorites. So yeah.
And now three authors that you always read. And now you did kind of mention one already. So if you want to reuse him, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. So I can do new ones. So I don't think I've mentioned Naomi Novik. I read everything Naomi Novik writes. Jacqueline Carey, same,
Mm,
absolutely everything. And Grossman is always an auto-buy as well. Just three, right? I can't get a fourth in there.
yes.
That's it. All right. Wow, I didn't know I thought I was gonna be worse at this game. I'm like overflowing with stuff that I want to tell you about people whose stuff I
Yeah.
read.
See, you kind of jinxed yourself, but like in a positive way. You're like,
Yeah,
I'm never going to be able to think of anything. Boom, boom, boom,
I put
boom.
a good luck curse on myself, yes. That
Yes.
and I think the fact that I prepped a little bit beforehand. So that's a little bit of cheating too. I really covered my bases there.
Preparation isn't cheating.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Just being
Okay. Next is two places you love to read.
as in places like where am I sitting while I'm reading or
Yeah,
setting?
either.
Okay, great. All right, that's easier because I was gonna have to think of fantasy places. I am a huge bed reader. I love reading in bed. I just really, really enjoy it. Sometimes I have been known to spend like 6 hours doing that, possibly even an entire day. So there's no end to how much reading in bed I can do. I also really like, and this is not great for attention, I like reading on the couch while the TV is on. And it doesn't really matter what's on the TV. I just enjoy hearing mumblings and whatever, something else happening at the same time. And I like kind of, it feels very cozy to me. I don't really know why, but I got into it. I suppose my family was always watching movies and I didn't feel like watching whatever it was I would be reading. And so now it has lots of happy connotations for me, even if I'm doing it by myself.
I am the exact same way. Put on a
Oh,
movie
crap,
for
I'm glad
like,
I'm not the only
someone else to
one.
watch. Yeah, no, there are a few
Yeah.
of us. I there are some who prefer to have complete silence when they read.
Hmm.
And there are times where I'm okay with that, like when I'm reading in bed at night, silence is good. But generally I have like either music on in the background or, someone is around watching TV or, you know, just, things going on around me and I'm
Yes,
reading so I'm still present and there, but doing my own
totally.
thing. Yeah.
It makes it feel more social in a way, I think.
Yeah.
It's like the extroverted version of reading,
Yes.
if that's even a
Definitely.
thing. I really wanted to be like, I like to read outside under a tree. And I'm like, I can't remember the last time I read outside. Some days I don't even go outside, and I have to remember when was the last time I went outside. So that doesn't happen very often. Plus, I read on my iPad a lot, and it's not the friendliest for outside reading. So I
Yeah.
used Yeah, unfortunately, it's like one of the downsides. I used to read outside more, I believe, back when I read more hard copy books, but not so much anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do a lot more audiobooks and e-readers now than what I used to. I used to be strictly paperback. And things just kind of change.
Yeah, they do. And I think it's perfectly fine. I get a lot of people apologizing to me for reading audiobooks as though that's not a valid form of reading. And I'm
Right?
just like, that's absolutely a valid form of reading. And I'm so happy for you that you can do that. I have a lot of trouble with audiobooks, and podcasts, in fact. So that's ironic. And it's because I think when I can't see the other person or I have no visual reference for what's happening, sometimes I'll just lose the plot. Like I have occasionally done interviews where I can't see the other person and I will forget the question that I'm answering mid-sentence and then I will just finish somewhere and hope that I answered the question. And usually, unless there's like complete mystified silence, I assume that I that's what happened. But that's why I can't audiobooks are tricky for me unless they're, very linear and not overly complex. It's a little bit difficult for me to retain the plot when I'm just listening.
Honestly, me diving into audiobooks, and this is something that I have talked about a couple of times on this podcast as well. I was never an audiobook person. I could pay attention for maybe 5 minutes, and then I would space out and like forget that I'm listening to something and dive back in and be like, wait, what is this? What
Oh,
is going on? Oh, I was listening to something. And it's really funny because my mom is always big in audiobooks and she will carry her phone with her, as she's like doing stuff around the house and she'll have the audiobook playing on like double or triple speed.
wow.
And
That is
it's always like
hardcore.
like I can barely pick out any of the words and I'm like staring at her like you're
Yeah.
crazy. Um, but
Or
with my
crazy
day
talented.
or yes, crazy talented, yes. She'll listen to this. So talented,
Awesome.
you're talented.
That's what we're
Um
we're we're just sticking to that.
yes. And with my day job, I spent a lot of time at my computer and I was always like kind of just having Netflix on over somewhere for a long time. And it got to the point where, Netflix was either canceling everything I wanted to watch
They
or,
do that.
taking stuff down that I wanted to rewatch. And like, I need a Netflix break. And like, okay, I'm gonna, try an audiobook spot, I've got Spotify Premium and they added audiobooks
Yeah.
as a offer. So I like, okay, we can try this. And I seriously started at like 10-15 minutes at a time
Nice. Okay. Well,
because
maybe I
that
should
was
give
all.
another go that way, like increments. I'm just so
Yeah.
obviously I'm like a binge reader. Like if I'm reading, it's
Yes.
gonna be hours of reading so many hours. So the concept of reading for 10, 15 minutes is very alien to me, but maybe I'm just going about it the wrong way since it's a different medium anyway.
Yes. And I have found myself, slowly increasing the speed. I can't jump right in at double speed,
Mhm.
but if I'm listening and, just like slowly turn it faster and faster and faster,
Mhm.
then I can get it to the point where it's at like double speed and I can actually pick it up.
Okay.
So you gotta like,
Ease yourself in there, yeah.
Exactly.
Unless you're
Ease
your mom.
yourself in,
Your mom
or
doesn't need a springboard. Your mom just
no,
gets there.
she just dives right in.
No runway necessary.
Whereas I'm like, boiling a lobster, you gotta
Yeah.
slowly turn it up.
Can confirm having seen, I didn't eat lobsters for like, this is so tangential, but because I lived on the North Shore in Massachusetts, I saw a lot of lobsters being boiled. And one time, this poor lobster was getting boiled, and its little claw just came out of the side of the pot. And it made a sound. And I've been assured that this sound is not like a real sound. And I was like, that lobster is screaming, and I cannot eat
Oh
lobster.
no.
Obviously, I broke like, I still remember this terrible, terrible memory will never leave me. But then I did at some point break my lobster, whatever you want to call it, even my stand for the lobsters, my lobster. I don't even know what one calls it when you just don't eat food out of. I guess it was like my lobster vegetarianism, but very specifically only for lobsters. No other animals. It was just the only one that I had seen brutally murdered. But yeah, you do have to turn the heat, and I think back to audiobooks, that's probably the only way that I could get through an audiobook without me being the one like getting my claw out there and be like, I can't, I've lost, I don't know what's happening and it's hurting me. It's too
Yeah.
hard.
Do it in like, small increments and kind of build
Yeah,
yourself up. Like you have to practice
you
listening to
do.
audiobooks. You really do. And I do it a lot while like
Yeah.
walking or if I'm at work, I do a lot of typing at work. So something monotonous paired with it kind of helps me
Hmm.
focus on it better. Like some part of my body is doing something so that my brain can kind of focus on the audiobook more. And now I can get through like listening for 3 hours before I need to
Wow.
like stop and take a break.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, thank you for this tip. I'll definitely try that.
Yeah, I think it's really worth it because there are so many narrators out there that are just amazing storytellers.
Mhm.
And now we have this new trend coming in of, I think they call them like, God, what do they call it? There's a new style of narration where they have like a full cast.
Really?
Yeah,
Like on,
dramatic. It's dramatic narrations, and they like practically act it out as a cast,
that's fantastic.
reading the narration to you, and it is amazing.
What kind of books have this sort of narration?
They're currently working through like the Akotar series
Got it.
has
I
it.
figured that made a lot of
Yeah.
sense. I assumed that
I
that would
don't
be
know
one
if
of
they've
them.
finished them all yet. And I've only kind of touched on them yet. I haven't really dove in deeply yet just because they're so long, so it's kind of a
Hmm.
commitment. But they're working on through those books with it. I know that they're going to be doing the Harry Potter books with
Got
the
it.
dramatic narration. And also, if you're on Audible, there are some that are like Audible only specialties.
Hmm.
There's one by Geneva Rose called hashtag Crime Time. And
Hmm.
that was the first like dramatic narration that I've had. And it was really cool. Like they get like the sound effects. Like if there's police sirens in the story, there will be a police siren sound effect behind the narration. And it's really immersive and really interesting and just kind of fun to dive into.
That's fantastic. It almost sounds a little bit like the old-timey radio shows where they were doing,
Yes.
yeah, right? Like where they were
Yes.
basically acting stuff out and they did have the sound effects. So, I guess, we're coming full circle. It's a
Yes.
lot of
Everything old
entertainment
becomes
media.
new again. Everything old
Absolutely.
becomes new again. Yes.
Uh,
Definitely. Okay, so we have one thing left on your five
yeah.
things, and this is one book you promised to read soon.
It's a little bit of a cheat as an answer, but I do really want to finish it. So I started this book like six different times. It's The Great Transition by Nick Fuller Guggens. And I've heard fantastic things about it. And it's one of those kind of dystopian eco books where the world has sort of gone to hell because of climate change and everything is terrible, but there's lots of hopeful narratives and it's very character driven. I just have never quite been in the mood for it. I find that I have to be in the mood for a certain type of book, but I know that I'm going to enjoy it once I start properly. I just have to make myself do it, which is not normally how I go about. Like usually I'm just like, yeah, whatever the heart wants, what it wants, and so I'm going to do that. But this one, I promise I'm going to read, and I'm going to read it soon. It's going to happen.
The struggles of a mood reader.
I know, really, truly. I cannot imagine not being one though. Like I can't even put myself, apparently I don't have enough empathy to imagine the different kind of reader. Since I've only ever been one of these, I'm like, who are the rest of you who can apparently like switch it on and off? I don't get it.
So we finished our game.
Yeah,
5 things. We made it through, and you remembered pretty much everything. So
thank you.
you did great.
I
You
worked
did
really hard.
great.
Thank you very much. Did I win? This is very
Yes, you
okay.
win a gold star.
Thank you. I need gold stars. I know since you're on teams too, I don't know if you ever get those little trophy icons
Yes.
from your boss. Whoa, do I love those? Like, it's just almost embarrassing how much I like them. So let's pretend you sent me a trophy icon for this one.
Yes.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna I'm gonna send you a gold star.
Thank you.
Gold
I'll
star
take
with your
it.
trophy.
I'll be so happy.
Okay, well, this has been so much fun. It has been such a pleasure celebrating your release day.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. This is definitely the highlight of Rise and Divine's Pub Day. Thank you for having me. This was fantastic. And thank you for giving me a gold star
Yes,
on my
all the
special
gold
day.
stars.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under @Must Love Books Podcast. Thank you and happy reading.